We are so excited to introduce to you our guest for today's episode, Demi Wylde, and you go by Demi.
I think that the issue with the dating apps is that we've taken the human element out of the dating app experience. And so when you actually are just like stuck there and you're swiping, what you're doing, you're not actually making a connection with a person. You're playing a video game.
And when you talk about losing the humanness in this experience, I always tell my clients, gay or straight or bi, poly, whatever they are, non-binary, I find myself telling them, just really try to be your honest self. And as a result of that, so many people do bring in their profiles, or they want help with kind of creating what they are.
Not everyone is going to be in love with everyone, and that's real. You want people to self-select out. So the more you can be, the better. Although, as my best friend's husband always says, if you don't know who the rat is in your relationship, you're probably the rat.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. This podcast also does not establish a standard of care, doctor-patient, or client relationship. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. And because each person is so unique, all listeners are encouraged to connect with counseling and medical professionals for assistance with their personal journey. All people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved.
Welcome to We're Not Fine. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson.
And I'm Doug Jensen. We thank you for listening every week to our deep and thought-provoking conversations about relationships. Hey, everybody. Welcome
to We're
Not Tuesday
Fine.
Episode of We're Not Fine.
Have you ever seen that Saturday Night Live episode where
Sweaty balls? Yeah.
No, but when they're not finishing each other's sentences, but they're sort of trying to say the same thing at the same time or sing the same thing at the same time.
I do remember that. Should we do that?
Hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not good at it, though.
Hello,
no, I'm not going to do that with you. Because your brain works very differently than mine.
Try it.
And no, I'm not even going to try.
What's the worst that could happen?
So I'm so excited for today's episode.
You're just scared.
I'm not scared at all. But I also... I'm so excited about today's episode. You know, we have somebody who's, Dimitri, is going to talk to us about the dating and hookup apps, the pros and cons. He does a podcast on really
hookup horror stories.
Hookup horror stories.
It's
like
fetish.
That is fun.
It's kink. It's like he talks about sexual deviance and
And you and I share
dating.
some bad date experiences, which you win the...
I won.
We won't even give you why. You have to listen to why, but
I could not believe I won.
Well, I was surprised that you said, I think I don't have anything to add. And then you're like, told us this story, which you'll need to wait for because we're not going to tell you now. So this is an exciting episode.
It really is. It's fun. It's fun to talk about sex. Remember when we asked Hannah about
Do you remember when you had some?
We'd had some past tense, more than you, sucker.
Oh, you think so?
Okay, the competition
Should we do a competition on...
The competition. I already won this episode, so
You won that episode on a dating. You have not won how many times you've had sex, nor how many people you've had sex with.
We're going to oh yeah, you'd win that. Because you're kind of a SLUT.
The Ethical Slut. What a great book that is.
Oh, I didn't know that was a book.
Yeah.
Well, there goes the title of my memoir. I'll have to rethink that.
Am I the unethical slut?
Yes.
Okay.
You are.
That is not accurate.
What we were going to chat about, Doug was just telling me about this new tattoo he's going to get, and he was like, for the first 8 hours, this is my appointment.
So I don't know how many people... Gosh, I guess I wear a t-shirt for this. So people know I have a sleeve, starts here, and it's a dragon. And my buddy is a tattoo artist, and he and I will be adventuring out to do my other sleeve. And we just kind of brainstormed on what I want it to be, and I cannot wait. And I'm not even going to share because I probably won't ever take a picture of it for people, but so
maybe on your OnlyFans.
This is on my OnlyFans. I don't have one
yet.
What I would say is this one is a dragon, and it's kind of on the head is on my pec, and it goes all the way, wraps around. There's symbolism on the bottom about a koi dragon in Japanese mystical history. Mythical history, I should say. And this one is going to be a merman, or as my tattoo buddy called it, Poseidopus. It is a combination of Poseidon and an octopus. So he's named it Poseidopus.
No, that is like not.
Is that the best? I love it.
It is, but I will tell you, it sounds a little bit more like Snoopy than it sounds like some really like sexy,
can I show
powerful.
you a picture, man? I gave him a picture of Poseidon that I really loved. Ooh, he's
I want to
hot.
see Poseidopus.
Yeah, you're gonna have to wait for that. Plus, there's gonna be a sea serpent, and because he and I went to Key West recently together, we talked about banyan trees, mangroves. We talked about adding maybe some squid and jellyfish. Like, I have a fascination with the ocean, as anybody who's ever gone to the ocean with me knows. I kind of just stare at it. Like when I visit my daughter in LA, Venice Beach is such a favorite place to watch people. But I just love walking up to the ocean and just watching it. Santa Monica Pier is a favorite place as well. Malibu, oh my God, nothing beats Malibu. But I'll be having them kind of, and he asked me, he said, you want them to fight each other or like be friendly with each other? And I said, I want them to fight, because there's this maybe internal struggle that I have between my dragon and my Poseidopus.
And I asked Doug, are you sure you don't want the dragon and the Poseidopus to be actually...
Don't you love saying that?
Yes, I really do.
Poseidopus.
Poseidopus.
My buddy is very clever with words.
But don't you want them to be coming together to find a solution for their problems?
No.
You want them to be in a perpetual fight on your nipple.
Not on my nipple, but on my pectorals and my shoulder and my bicep and my forearm, all the way down. We're going to match.
I feel like that's going to look really
now.
good when you're like 93.
When I'm like sagging and my Poseidopus looks like something much different.
A sagopus.
Can I tell you, it's that internal conflict that will always make this podcast interesting.
Yes, it's just...
That's how I'm going to frame that.
It's too bad that I've already solved all of my issues and I have just nothing to report because I live in ease and peace.
With my identity.
Namaste.
Ugh, gross. Anyway, please enjoy this exciting episode. I will keep you posted. So by the way, this particular sleeve took like 30 hours. So I feel like we've reserved the first 8 hours, and I'm like, okay, that's probably a quarter of it.
Maybe it's just the puss. Bye, guys. Enjoy the episode. We are so excited to introduce to you our guest for today's episode, Demi Wylde, and you go by Demi, so we're going to call you Demi just for this.
Sure.
You are an author, a content creator, and a sex educator on a mission to help people understand sex, dating, and relationships. Us too. But I feel like
my God, yes.
You go down and dirty, and we literally cannot wait. You are a published author. You released 2 poetry books, The Bitter Blue Pill and All Was Nothing in the Time of Champions. And you're working on releasing your first memoir, which is bound to be juicy, The Deviant Diaries, which is a tell-all about your wildest dating and hookup stories. You talk about grief, shame, mental health, STIs, relationships, and healing, which is pretty much what we're going to be talking about today.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with the script for a second and say that you also run a YouTube channel and host your own podcast, Hookup Horror Stories with Demi Wylde, where you invite guests to discuss their sexuality and relationships and to share their crazy dating stories. And I must tell you, Demi, as you got on the screen, I was almost jumping out of my seat with excitement to have this conversation, because I feel like I work a great deal with the LGBTQ community as a gay identified therapist. And I will tell you, I have my own experiences with all of these sexual hookup sites, but also dating sites, etc. And I have worked through so many different stories with people. I've been called a catfish. which I'm really flattered by because evidently my pictures suggest that I'm using someone else's.
Wait, is that a compliment or an
That's a good
insult?
thing, right?
Because
It's a good thing. It's like I look so hot that people are like,
so.
"You're faking it. You're not really that person."
Oh, I thought you meant that when they meet you, they think you catfished them. And I'm like, I think you guys think that's a compliment, but it's actually not.
It's like, Demi, you know what I'm talking about. Literally, in LA, it happens all the time because I have a daughter there that lives there, and so I'm always spending time with family. And I can't hook up in like 5 minutes. I think you're a catfish, and I get sanctioned by the app that I'm on. So anyway, I'm so excited.
Too good looking.
I'm really
to be
not.
True.
Yeah. Well, if you look downward, I'm kidding. So this is what I'm going to say. We are so excited to talk about these issues because they are taboo topics, and I think we don't talk about them enough. And so taking a look at the awkward, dark, taboo subjects, demystifying, making them lighter, and you're here should share your collective experience, but also the dangers, I want to say, and pitfalls of modern dating.
Yes.
And one of the things Talia and I have talked so much about is, these dating apps now, there's so many of them, and I think I'm someone who believes strongly in this possibility. I think people can use them for whatever. So I'm kind of eager to have discussion with you about this and see what you think based on your experiences, because I think they can be really healthy, but I think people need to be really brutally honest about what they're looking for, and they need to know themselves. But we'll get into that. What I'd love to know and where we can start this, Demi, thank you for smiling and going with me. I'm a very big talker about this topic. I want to know, like, how did you get passionate about this topic and doing this work?
I've always been passionate about this topic. I think probably since I was like my mid-teens, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Like I got, your first boner or like whatever. Like I've just always been really, really interested in it, and like what is going on with my body, what is going on with like my thoughts, what is it with other people, relationships. I've always been a writer, so like I started off writing like kind of like blogs and like short stories and things like that always revolved around like sexuality, relationships, crushes, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then I developed more into like more kind of in-depth analysis of what relationships mean in my like early 20s and stuff, and then I kind of just never stopped. I've been writing ever since. I think the pandemic gave me a little bit extra time to sit down and like really like go through like my catalog of stories, I suppose, and I really kind of delved into like what sex really is, and I've had all this experience, I've had all this knowledge that I'm just like not doing anything with. Let me just write it out. Let me share these ideas with people.
And people are starving for that. And because it feels like such an isolating experience sometimes to be dating or figuring out our own sexuality before we even know what questions to ask or who to talk to about what. Demi, why do you think it's important to break the stigma around sex?
Well, there's just a huge societal stigma around sexuality. Like we're kind of dealing with it as educators on the internet, for example. Like we have a lot of like censorship that's happening currently for sex educators. OnlyFans content creators are being censored. It's not even like we're really like showing anything. We're just discussing it. And even just discussing it has its own kind of stigma. And then not only that, but like we're being censored because of it too, which is dangerous.
Wow.
But what we need to understand is that when we harbor prejudices, discrimination or stigma, that we basically have an understanding of whatever the subject is inherently flawed. We don't understand it completely. So when we do talk about sex and stuff, it's an interrelational activity and it usually involves others. And so when we're not talking about it, discussing it freely, that ignorance actually hinders us.
Of course it does. And Demi, I'm going to warn you that at some point I'm going to ask you to share with our audience, our listeners and our viewers, like your own personal circumstances right now, because I think that influences kind of everything, but I'm not going to ask you yet. Let's talk about the term because it kind of associates with that stigma, the phrase sexual deviant. What comes up for you when you hear that word?
Well, sexual deviant's kind of like a term that I've adopted as my own because it's an antiquated term. It's basically used in like psychotherapy back in like the 1940s, 1930s, and it usually referred to someone who was referred to perversion, right?
Yep.
So when we talk about sexual deviance, it talks about perversion, and perversion can be anything from like a kink to a taboo to like just a regular like run of the mill homosexual person.
Like myself.
But then not only that, but and myself,
Yeah.
but then also related to illegal stuff, like rape or like bestiality and things like that. And so when we kind of lump those two kind of categories together, that creates more stigma, more shame. And I know a lot of people lost their lives because of this. Like people were lobotomized because of it. Luckily we're not there anymore, but that stigma still sticks around. And when we're talking about sexual deviance and stuff, I've adopted the term myself because I feel like we're all a little bit deviant in our own ways. And so when I talk about being a sexual deviant, I'm talking about just, regular stuff, But
well, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think that's what you're saying. Like the word deviant might just be that there's some difference amongst us. I want to, for
Correct,
the purposes of people listening, to let people know that until, I don't know the year, but until I think it was DSM-4, homosexuality was still considered a mental health diagnosis, and incredibly, I mean, that just obviously led to the stigma. I remember being interviewed by a local magazine for the LGBTQ community called Lavender. I was interviewed and asked if religion had anything to do with that stigma, and I almost spit out my tongue. I'm like, like all of it, like the origins of that misinformation and misguidedness, right? But I also will say, and I appreciate you talking about kink and about all those other pieces of what is oftentimes considered deviant, because of course it's not, but we internalize that stuff too as gay men, which, by the way, when we joke about you and I being like just gay men, as simple as that might be, how vanilla is that these days? Like, I feel like I'm not cutting edge anymore. I don't feel like there's anything unique. I'm just a dude.
Just a plain
who identifies as a
old gay
dude.
man.
I'm a fucking plain cisgender gay man.
Oh,
so,
yawn.
If you're not a panromantic, bisexual, demisexual,
I was going to make.
If you're not any of that, you're boring, right?
Super boring.
I know. I'm sure you get demisexual jokes. I was going to make one right away about your name, but I'm not going to. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is,
he already stole it. He already stole the joke back.
You took the joke from me.
Which is what I love about what you're saying also, is that's a term that I took for my own. It's just to take control, or it feels really empowering to be like, oh, you're calling me that as an insult? Well, let me tell you, this is actually the fun club, and this is where you want to be. And welcome. I like it.
Yeah. And language changes over time too. And, language changes over time. So like when you take things back, you really like reclaim it as yourself.
I love that. I mean, and we do that with so many things, but yeah, it's like the deviance, the, kink, just if you are talking about sex and your own sexuality and it isn't exactly described in the Bible, then we're all a part of your club. Right?
Correct.
I've got a beginner's
Absolutely.
mind. I might be the most boring one of the three of us.
You might be the most boring. You're also the minority.
I'm listening. I am.
How do you
love
feel
it.
about that?
Great. It's where I belong. Say more. Say more. So Demi, you also, you talk about dating. You talk about the apps, and so many stories of sex, and I am dying to know what you think about the dating apps and all the stories that you've heard, and what do you think about them? How can they be improved, or are they perfect?
Oh, please.
Oh, they're perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. They absolutely need to just stay exactly how they are.
All right, problem solved.
That's why
Mic
we
drop.
keep creating new
solved.
ones, right?
No, they're inherently flawed. And I think the reason why, I think I've done a lot of thought process on this, and I've discussed this with many people as well. I think that the issue with the dating apps is that we've taken the human element out of the dating app experience. And so when you actually are just like stuck there and you're swiping, what you're doing, you're not actually making a connection with a person. You're playing a video game, and it's a numbers game.
Yep.
And when you are just constantly swiping and swiping, you're kind of also taking away that you're actually talking to another person. And so I think we've just completely taken the human element out of the dating experience. So I'm honestly more of an advocate for in-person meeting than anything. Like I feel like we need to go back to that in some ways. But if you need to do an app situation, to meet people. I think we need to find some way to put the human element back into it, whether that be, I don't know, like speed dating. I think Bumble had a speed dating thing that was recently. It was like a video chat for like a minute or something like that. I think they were kind of testing that out. So I think that's a great idea. But and also Hinge, for example, they also have the voice notes feature, which you could do that as well. So I think that there's certain ways that you can bring back the human element into it. I think it needs to be improved upon. But I think that's ultimately what the issue is that we've gamified the dating experience.
Well, and not everybody presents as their very best self with like 2 static images of them with their dog and them with a niece or whatever. Yeah, so it feels crucial to hear their voice or see them in action. And I think that there's this piece, I mean, we just talked about apathy, but there's this piece also that like people don't really put a lot into their profiles sometimes. And so it does feel like you're flipping through just a catalog of people that don't have differentiators between their personalities. Like everyone sort of looks and sounds the same in these profiles.
Well, I don't know about, I don't know about that. I think, obviously a number of my straight women will say that fish and hunter pictures are not attractive to them. Please take them off. I've guided both straight and gay and bi people on creating pictures that actually really represent their best. I've told this story before of the straight guy who was in his 60s who had the dorkiest pictures he brought in to show me because I was helping him put his profile together.
That's my favorite.
And he literally, I said, okay, you are an artist. You are so handsome. You have riveting blue eyes. Put black glasses on. Put a piece of art next to yourself and dress in black. The women flocked the minute he did that. And it was funny. Within a month, he found someone that he spent most of his life with, I believe. Here's what I want to say about this too, Demi. Like, I love this topic. And when you talk about losing the humanness in this experience, I always tell my clients, gay or straight or bi, poly, whatever they are, non-binary, I find myself telling them, just really try to be your honest self. And as a result of that, so many people do bring in their profiles or they want help with kind of creating what they are. And Hinge does this thing where they kind of have these predestined questions. And I read through some of them and I'm like, ugh, who came up with these?
Like the questions are
cringe.
Dumb.
You what?
They're a little cringe.
Oh, it's total cringe. Like some of them are awful. And I'm like, I don't even know what I would answer to some of those because there's no way to get a valid sort of like deeper response to anything. So I do love that they have the voice thing because I think voice can become a part of chemistry. Whereas demisexuals would say that's not the case. Of course, they would like to have an attachment. They would have to bond first before any of those other sight, smell, touch, feel, taste experiences come into the chemistry piece.
But those also probably help get people there.
I think it's a beginning. It's a beginning. It's not quite, we're completely there, I think.
And I want to just go back, Demi, to what you said about like meeting in person and you're an advocate. I tell the story too. I was single, maybe I'm still single, but 15 years ago when I ended a relationship, I went on like 30 dates that year. I was really fortunate, but I found myself being so rude in person because I knew right away if there was going to be a match or not based on this initial kind of chemistry. I'm not a demisexual. I like visually some things.
You're the opposite of that. You don't even need to see their face to know if you're interested.
So Demi, I can tell you that my grinder sometimes goes off while we're meeting and I'll show Talia what pictures have been sent to me and she's like, what the hell? Yeah. Why would someone send their dick? Anyway.
And Doug will be like, oh, wow, he's hot. And it's like one butt cheek. And I'm like, I don't think my brain works
both.
that way.
I need both.
Oh, you need to see if they're symmetrical.
Do you remember that guy with the heart on that sent his picture while we were having lunch?
I can't unsee it.
Anyway, Demi's like, why did I sign up for this podcast?
I didn't know what I was signing up for, honestly.
I told him it was about gardening.
Yeah, I thought
I was talking to therapists, not like Dean and Kay in the morning, whatever.
I know, surprise!
Actually, I'm equally surprised. Demi, let's talk about red and green flags. Like when you talk about like, what are the red flags? What are the green flags when it comes to relationships? What would you tell people?
Well, to me, there's two kinds of red flags. So there's little red flags and there's big red
Ooh, I
flags.
love
The little
that.
red flags are
Alright.
things that are like, just kind of small things, they kind of just up the ick factor of a person and not necessarily anything that's like like immediately repulsive, but they're kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. Like maybe they eat soup weird or like something like that's a little red flag. But big red flags are things like, abusive language, signs of aggression, being negligent of others, being rude to the server. Those are big red flags, And so, but also, there's also a third one. Sometimes you're the red flag.
What?
Was that about me?
He was pointing,
Was he pointing right at me?
you. Go on, say more.
Well, sometimes, you're not really not sure like if what you're bringing to the table, you know what I mean? Some people think that it's always the other person. You're like, no, if you're constantly going on dates with people and you're not finding anybody, like what's the common denominator here? There's something maybe you're doing that you're not bringing to the table that maybe ups your red flag factor. Things like, maybe you're eating soup weird and you don't know it, or like, I think getting a fresh pair of eyes to kind of like getting feedback as well when you actually go on the dates and stuff. Getting feedback is like, hey, I had a really great time with you. Can you let me know? Or like maybe I didn't have a great time with you. Can you ask them why?
Yep.
Getting a little bit of feedback from people is actually a really great thing. I think a lot of us are afraid of criticism, for example, but I think when you realize these things about yourself, you're easier to improve upon them.
No, I really appreciate that, Demi.
Yeah.
It's I've oftentimes told people who have a hard time kind of with a second date or getting one, like, ask for feedback. Was it your breath? Was it how you ate the soup? Was it something you said?
Snaggletooth.
Okay, I got called that before I had dental surgery, so that's very personal, then hurtful.
Well, look at your gorgeous chompers now. That could never be the problem.
What, these?
Look
Anyway,
at those chompers.
But Demi, that's a really interesting thing. I wish for people to be brutally honest. I don't think there's any point. It's kind of like how I do therapy. Like, nobody's paying me to blow smoke up their ass or to like sit there and hum and say, that must be hard. I just don't think that's helpful. I think empathy is helpful, but it's got to go deeper. And the same about dating. Like, I want feedback. And if somebody's not into me, move on. Like, I don't want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with me or make me their priority. And so I'd always tell people, don't feel hurt by somebody not wanting to be with you.
Right.
You don't want to be with them. That's not the right fit.
Not everyone is going to be in love with everyone, and that's real. You want people to self-select out. So the more you can be, the better. Although, good point. Like, as my best friend's husband, Jay, always says, if you don't know who the rat is in your relationship, you're probably the rat. And you're seeing the same with dating. Is that if you seem to be falling flat every single time, it's possible it's you.
Well, it can't be either Demi or I. It's not Demi or I, just to point that out. I want to go back to what you said, though. Wouldn't it be great if we would give honest feedback to people? I think it's really helpful. And, you're right. I think people don't necessarily love criticism, but why not? Like, put that out there. Put it as openly as possible. What would you say green flags are? What would you tell somebody who's like, do I go ahead with this? What would you tell them is a good sign to move forward?
Well, number one, if they allow me to talk about serial killers ad nauseum, I think that's probably a green flag for me.
So they're individualized green flags.
So that one's a personal one. I did have a situation where I was on a date with someone and I just like went off on this tangent about serial killers.
Yep.
And I'm a true crime nut. Like I listen to all the podcasts, documentaries and stuff. And so like, but this guy was like looking at me across the table like, what did I get myself into?
But he didn't leave.
Yeah, things like that. He didn't leave, but we never went on another date after that.
Okay.
He was like, he's talking too much about this. Maybe it's a little personal for him.
Self-selecting out.
His middle name is Dahmer.
That's right.
Right. But I think to make that more broad, more general, I think if a person allows you to be your full self, if a person allows you to like, support your interests, for example. Another big thing for me is a sense of humor. I love to laugh. Someone needs to be able to make me laugh. I kind of have a dark, twisted sense of humor sometimes. So like you really have to get along with that as well. But also things like, caring for your parents or like caring for your siblings or things like that. Having a dog is a huge green flag for me. You know, things that you care about, having a shared interest is a great green flag. You know, there's so many different things and so many like specific things that you can really like kind of navigate where feels good for you. And that way you can like make the most out of these dates and these relationships.
I love that.
You know, Demi, what you're talking about is just be you.
Yes.
You know, and be yourself, and
Just
don't
be
be afraid to be yourself. And, you know, I have so many stories too, especially when I was really dating aggressively for, you know, and that was again 15 years ago. I don't do as much of that now. But I will tell you something. I have found myself thinking the same thing. I mean, it's about being honest. It's about being true to who you are. You know, I'm a dad of 2 kids, and, you know, I've had people say, oh, I always wanted to be a dad. And I'm like, that's a red flag for me. These are not your kids. They're mine. So, I mean, it's a really interesting comment about, you know, if you want to have family, if you like the idea of family holidays, etc., that's one thing, but these are not your kids. And they don't need another dad at this point, given that they're both adults. But
that also sounds like an individualized, maybe red flag, green flag, because there might be other people that would be like, oh, thank God, because I would love to have a partner raising these kids. But of course, it
depends on the
empty
timeline.
nester.
Absolutely. You know, and the other piece that I would say, and it goes back to kind of what we talked about with sexual kinks and whatnot, I have over the course of time, and I'm going to guess that you have as well, Demi, based on how you talk and what you're doing. We know ourselves pretty well. And so there are things that I won't live without sexually. I would not live without being able to explore some of what is kinky for me or of sexual, you know, interest to me. I won't go without it. And I also think that I'm a big personality. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Did you hear something in the background? Someone mumbling?
And so, you know, I think what you said about like your sense of humor and the fact that you like these true crime stories and serial killer stories, which again, I might say, is that a flag? Like you're trying to tell me you are one. But I really think, Demi, that what you're talking about is just really be yourself. And I don't want to make, I've worked with a couple other clients who are similar to me. And I'm always like, if your partner wants you to be smaller or less visible or less engaging with the server about their personal life, that's
they're
not
going to for you.
They're not for me. If they find that to be like, I'm embarrassed by you because you're such a big guy, big guy and big personality. I do not want to make myself smaller for someone. And what a beautiful message you have to just be yourself. And that person should appreciate and regard and maybe get joy from who you are.
That's what I was going to say is I feel like the green flags might not just be he didn't leave. It's going to, you know, it's not just like someone putting up with something that's not for them, but it's this feeling that your partner celebrates you and loves your craziness and your kinks and your quirks. Speaking of, you brought something up that I was really curious about. So how soon into dating might one feel like they need to talk about their own sexual preferences, their own fetishes, their own kinks? If they have an STI, like, is that date 1? Is it like before the appetizers? Like, when does one do such a thing?
I'm dying to hear what you think because I know what I think.
Well, I feel like every timeline for that specific conversation might be different for everyone, depending on where you are in the relationship. But I think whatever the case may be, would probably have to happen before the first sexual encounter.
Okay.
You know,
that
whether
makes
that be
sense.
right before or like the day of or something like that, but it would have to be before the first sexual encounter. You know, things like STI disclosures, you know, if you have herpes, if you have HIV, things like that. If you have, you know, certain trauma responses that might interfere with the experience, you know, that might be a good thing to know as well. Like, I don't know, sometimes I cry during sex or whatever. like that would be a good thing for your partner to know beforehand, right?
Important to
know. Or I
note.
growl during sex. Go ahead.
Or growl. Right.
I cry or growl or throat punch.
Yeah, but also, I also don't think you have to put everything out there right off the bat. I don't have to think that, you know, those are the most important things that I would say have to have beforehand. But, you know, things like, you know, I might be into putt play. I might be into, you know, this or that kink afterwards.
BDSM.
That's more along
absolutely
BDSM.
Yep.
I think those conversations can kind of happen gradually. I think you can have those they can come up naturally in the conversation. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but like, you know, the more you explore with another partner where you are sexually, where you are romantically, those conversations will tend to come up.
Does anyone feel like telling the lamos in the crowd, like me, like name 20 kinks?
Can I add to what you said first?
Of course.
So I want to add about PrEP and PEP, right? So for those viewers who are unfamiliar, PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV, and it's typically Truvada. There's also Desposy. And so there are medications that people obviously can take to prevent transmission of HIV. I also just want to put a very, very big plug out there, because one of the things, I've worked in HIV since the 90s when people were dying rapidly after transmission, Demi. And so this is very personal to me.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for that kind comment. I will be honest as well, Demi, and I know you understand this. I have so much trauma around losing so many members of our community as a result of that. So it's a very tricky thing for me. But I struggle so much. I get angry at people who still don't understand that if you're untransmittable, if you have no if you don't have the virus in your system at any detectable level, you cannot transmit HIV. Undetectable equals untransmittable. I want to do that public service announcement on behalf of everyone who's living with HIV, who has been taking their medications on a regular basis, who has been responsible. You cannot give HIV to someone. So not only yourself, please know that and feel confident going out there. But if somebody fucking has stigma about this at this point in time, please educate yourself. But PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, a lot of us are on it who are negative and are able to prevent transmission as well. But there's also PEP. So if you have sex with someone and you don't discuss what exactly as you said, go into the emergency room. They will give you one of these medications to alleviate the concern that you have about transmission. But you said something so important to me. I remember I had a client who had HIV and herpes, and he just felt like, I am so damaged goods. I am so unable to go out there. Bullshit. Go out there, be entirely honest. I love what you said, Demi, by the way, how sensitive of you to have that conversation about, maybe before you have sex so that people are not freaked out afterwards. They don't feel deceived. Be upfront and honest, and don't have any regret, shame, blame, anything about this. We are who we are. We all bring shit to the table. So please put yourself out there. We've all done things that, we might have done differently in the past. But these are not things that make you dirty. One of the things I just fucking hate about the gay apps is that people talk about be clean. What the fuck does that mean? People who have HIV or any other STDs are not dirty. So I just want to put that little plug out there. I know that's a little aggressive on my part, but I want to say it for you lamos. I'm kidding.
No, it's absolutely important.
Thank you.
That's a very important conversation to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that, obviously. So you wanted to know about kinks.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want to name some?
I could,
name
but
20 kinks.
Yeah, name 20 kinks. We'll have it like we could go around.
Do you know what pup play is that he mentioned before?
No, but I pictured it immediately. Is it different than being like what are they called?
I'll bring my pup
fuzzy?
wig next time and wear it.
Yeah, is it just like pretending that you're puppies?
It's a subsect of the it's a subsect of the leather community. They actually have like these leather masks that look like puppies, and then they have owners, so
leashes.
It's a role playing thing. It's a very much
love it. Okay, I want more. What else? What are my other options?
Do you know what BDSM is?
Of course.
Okay.
Bondage.
Okay, there's 2.
Discipline.
Sadism.
Sadomasochism.
There you go. You got it.
Whips and chains and 50 Shades of Grey. Okay,
Exactly.
next.
Let's go furries.
Furries.
Blood play. There is scat play. There is piss play,
which is golden showers.
Golden showers. I think R. Kelly.
All sorts of bodily fluids.
Which, by the way, there are bug chasers on these apps still who are looking to become infected with HIV, which is concerning in its own self.
We won't get into that right now. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that sounds like that sounds more mentally ill, trying to catch a disease that might kill you. Like that doesn't sound like sexy. Does that sound like sexy to people? Come on.
I'm
somebody.
I'm honestly looking at Demi now. I'm like, this is where I don't want to say anything. I have this conversation all the time.
That feels like being passively suicidal to me.
But HIV does no longer mean a death sentence. So it's not exactly that. There is a misinterpretation. I'm just going to respond to this. There's a misinterpretation, especially in Minnesota, where there are amazing benefits. By the way, Demi, where are you?
I'm Southern California.
Oh, sweet. Okay. My daughter lives in LA. San Diego, where?
Actually, I was in LA until just recently. I'm back in Riverside, though.
You are like getting rain down there in weird amounts.
We were getting wet.
Are you safe? My daughter kind of laughs.
We're good. We have great weather now. We have amazing weather right now.
Oh, good.
Okay, that's good. By the way, no, I'm not going to go into that. But, I will say, I mean, yeah, let's go back. I'm not going to.
Wow. I want answers, and no one wants to give them to me. Okay.
So
I'll Google it
Minnesota
later.
has very good benefits for people living with HIV, and so people would anticipate that they were given a lot of entitlements historically, like disability. We have programs that allow for subsidized housing. We have programs that allow for making sure people have their medications, antiretrovirals. So I think Minnesota is known for their benefits, and some people thought if I've just become positive, I'll be taken care of.
Oh.
It is not the case, by the way. It's a distortion.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you want to keep going on kinks, Demi?
No, I didn't have anything to add to that.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one. Can we move on from kinks?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Yeah.
So we did have a question for you about hookups for straight, bi, LGBTQ, kink, and poly folks. And I have so many thoughts on this. Like, I'm really intrigued by all of what we do on there. Like, people who prefer a particular race or people who prefer a particular masculine versus feminine person. I will say there's a lot of people looking for trans folks. And, I'm kind of curious. I'm going to ask a very specific question for you about this. Where do you think that becomes a prejudice or a bias? And where do you think it's healthy to just ask for what you're looking for?
Ooh. That's a good one.
Thank you.
I think inherently, if you are specifically looking for a very specific thing, there is inherently some sort of bias there. I think that you can't really escape that. But it is also important to really discuss what you want, discuss what you're into. So, yeah, I think where it comes to, I'm maybe not the right person to ask this completely, but
Demi, I love your answer
I
so
don't
far.
really have but I don't really have like a whole lot of like experience, say for example, for like the race thing. I don't have an answer for that.
Can I tell you, Demi, you said something that I think is at the basis of what I believe as well. Is there a bias to it? Of course. If somebody wants someone who's more masculine versus feminine, if somebody who specifically wants someone who is a trans person, if somebody wants a twink, if somebody wants someone with muscles, if somebody wants someone with tattoos, if somebody wants someone that looks like me versus not, I think it's okay to have a bias as long as we own it.
Yeah, it's just your type. It's what you're attracted to.
It is your type,
it's
but
knowing yourself.
we in the LGBTQ community get very touchy about that. Like, there's a lot of criticism for people who say, I prefer masculine guy. There's a lot of criticism and judgment, and I don't like that because there's someone for everyone. I think that's the beauty of twinks and twunks and bears and cubs and otters and pups and whatever else. Oh my.
What's a twunk?
Combination hunk and twink.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Like Zac Efron?
Ooh.
Skinny guy with muscles.
Okay. All right. I'm picturing it.
You are. With Zach, it's not entirely that. So, I mean, that's the thing. I love what your answer was. You said, Demi, I can't answer that. You answered it beautifully, I think. I think we have to be honest about who we are. It goes back to that theme that you talked about in terms of writing your ad. I will tell you that when I have an app
you had a Grindr question, too. You go right ahead.
I have a ton of Grindr questions. I'm going to put you on the spot for a lot of different things because I think it's really important that we have this conversation. But I want to say, I really tell people, just ask for what you want. I don't think it's important to be so careful. I think if you end up with someone that you don't have really strong chemistry with in whatever way that is, we run into trouble. Those relationships inevitably don't last very well.
Well, and we're attracted to who we're attracted to. The end. Like, isn't that the moral of the story?
So I want to ask two questions too, and I apologize because I'm going multiple here.
He was trying to answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, Demi.
Yeah, can I say one more thing actually?
Of
So I
course.
think while it is important to say, what it is that you want, it is also important to acknowledge that there is inherent, racism, bias, prejudices inherent in the community as well. So it is also very important to acknowledge that even if you are certainly have a type that you go towards, it is
Mhm.
important to also acknowledge that there is also that other factor is in there as well. So
Mm.
just
Which
FYI.
which people on the recipient side of that, and I'm just going to go Rice Queen for a second. It's the name of somebody who likes an Asian person, right?
Mm.
And so we have all of kind of these names for it. I think it's refreshing to have it called out.
Mhm.
But if there's a generalization made, and Demi, that goes for you, it goes for you, it goes for me. If somebody objectifies us based on how we look, like I get called daddy a lot, I don't love that. Yes, I'm an older dude. And yes, I have kids, but I don't love being called daddy by somebody. It implies a power differential. It implies a role. And I'm not into it. I actually let people know that's
There's
not
a
appealing to me.
fetishization that goes along with it as well. That's very problematic.
Yeah, there's a fetishization. I also, you can't see, but I have one sleeve on my arm. I have another sleeve. And boy, you and I both know what that does to some people in terms of generalizations about what my position that I like is, as well as where I belong in our community. So
Yeah.
we just do all of that. I want to ask two very specific questions to you, Demi. I want to talk about whether or not you think, because I will share that my opinion on any app that you're on, whether it's a dating app like Hinge, or whether it's Match.com, or whether it's Grindr, or whether it's Tinder, or whether it's Bumble, or whatever it is, I do believe that people can be very clearly asking for whatever they're looking for. I think there's people who are looking for just a quick hookup. I think you can also find a date on there. But you have to just put yourself out there openly and honestly. And, I've had clients come to me and they're like, I said I wanted a date. And everyone's like, oh, is that why you're on Grindr, or is that why you're on Tinder? And it's like, yeah, tell them, yes, it is. I get to use this format and platform to find what I'm looking for. So question number one, do you think it is reasonable to think that you can find anything you're really looking for on any of these apps? But the second thing I'd love your comments on is for people, I don't know how to say this in a way that is very sensitive, because I have been married to a woman. I was closeted for a long time, but people on the down low, like, how do you encourage people to think about and I'm going to say the morality of connecting with someone who is married and might be not honest with her spouse in an ethically non-monogamous way? So I'm going to hand you those two questions. My apologies.
Okay, those are two very large questions. What was the first one again?
The first one, do you think you can find anything and everything on that app?
Okay. Well, the first question, certainly you can. It's possible. I think so. However, I think you need to also think about where it is that you're looking. So, like, for example, on Grindr, most people are going to be looking for sex. If you want a date, it's possible you can find a date there. It's certainly. But I would say few and far between. If you're looking for a hookup, that's probably the place to go. So I think it's certainly possible. I don't think that many deep, meaningful relationships are made there. I, however, am an exception to the rule. My current partner, I did meet on Grindr 7 years ago. We just became friends afterwards, and then it grew.
Perfect example.
So it's certainly possible. But I would say, as far as finding romance on Grindr, I don't think that's where people usually look.
Where do people look for romance?
Look at, Tinder.
Tinder.
I would say maybe like Hinge, Tinder. You can find better. I don't even want to say that, but like you can see, I think you can definitely find romance on the other apps.
Okay.
I think, yeah. I mean, the reality is, I think most people are on these apps these days. And so there is always a possibility of what happened to you happening for others. You might come across this weird person that you had no idea would be a connection, but is. So,
like, you're being exposed to many people. Although what you're saying, it sounds like, Demi, is that people that are typically on Grindr might be very specific about, this is what I'm looking for, or this is what I'm expecting to find. But then there are the exceptions, right? Where you meet someone where you're like, ooh, I actually like you. And I actually really enjoy this conversation too.
Right.
Yeah. So I would have, there's a quality versus quantity in that thing. On the dating apps, it's a quantity game. So like the more you swipe, the more people you meet, the more opportunity there is for you to have a connection with someone, I think. if that makes sense at all.
Mhm.
However, there is certainly not the quality of people there that you would maybe if you wanted to find a date, for example. You're gonna find headless torsos, you're gonna find butt pictures, you're gonna find dick pics.
Torso-less
That's what
butt
you're gonna
pictures. Yep.
torso-less
pics.
butt pictures, exactly. And then the second question that you had was, remind me one more time. Oh,
It
the
was-
morality of
Like men
I forgot.
or whomever that are on the DL, possibly married, that haven't come out and are exploring their sexuality online. Is that right?
Well, I think that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly healthy. That's the place to do it if that's what you're gonna do. I don't necessarily find anything fault with that. I think you have to allow people their space to do that.
Oh.
However, it does somewhat feel a little bit like, maybe they're infiltrating our space a little bit. But I think that in order to be an inclusive community, we have to allow people to kind of freely express themselves or freely try things out.
Do you think they should be upfront about that, though, right away? That, like, this is my situation? Or if it's just a hookup, does it not matter?
If it's a hookup, I don't think it matters, but I think that the more communication is obviously better. I think most DL guys make it very known that they are DL. Like they have it on the profile, they have it like the first question I'm DL. Like that's
I'm DL. I need
cool.
discretion, all of those things. I think one of the things, and I'm not sure I'm even willing to comment on this because, Demi, one of the things you've said really beautifully throughout this interview so far is that, everyone is different. I don't hold people accountable. Like if you find out that the person you just had sex with is married and on the down low, I don't think you're responsible for that. You can't possibly know. I think everyone gets to make a decision about that. I mean, there's people on these apps who are saying, if you're married, pass. If you're in a relationship, pass. If you're looking for a threesome, pass. Like, I just think it's really clear that some people know where their boundaries are around this. What I love about how you responded, Demi, is that you don't have judgment or shame about that. And that, bookstores in the past and bathhouses in the past and bars in the past were a way that people could kind of explore safely in that setting to kind of explore their sexuality. I, as a therapist, would love everyone to be incredibly honest with their spouse or their significant other or partner about that, but it isn't always possible for a lot of different reasons. And I think, I've had people say, well, what would it feel like if you were on the other side of that and your person was exploring without telling you and putting you at risk of STIs and STDs? And so it's a really complicated issue.
It's inherently there's always some kind of risk. I think that when you go into these situations, when you are hooking up, when you are going into these spaces with people like bathhouses, for example, there's always inherently some sort of risk, either STI risk or risk of violence, whatever the situation may be. You just be cautious about when you're going.
Right.
I hear through the grapevine that you have a handful of horrific dating horror stories that I think inquiring minds would love to hear. If
or
you'd
hookup or dating.
Yeah.
Are you talking dating or hookup?
I don't know. All of it. I just know if you have an entire podcast devoted to hookup horror stories.
Do tell. I'll get the popcorn.
Yeah,
we need
tell us.
popcorn.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
So I'll tell the one I usually tell. And it's revolves around I hope I get his blessing for saying this, but like I have an ex. Around 2017 or so, we were going through a breakup and I was moving out of our apartment. I had moved to Northern California and it was just a really kind of troubling time. I had a lot of issues going on at that time. There's a death in the family, kind of drinking out of control kind of situation. So I was just like kind of like self-medicating in a lot of ways. And so I was like, well, what other way that you can self-medicate? By having sex with people. So I got on the apps again and I started going all over the place and all kinds of fun characters I met on those journeys. One of which was a older gentleman who lived out kind of in the boonies. He lived like maybe 45 minutes outside of like where I lived in Northern California, which was Sacramento at the time.
That is the boonies.
Is the boonies. Well, he was like out in like Roseville, which is like way out there.
Even more,
like
45 minutes further into the boonies.
So he invited me over and I was like, cool, let me just hop in a Uber or a Lyft or whatever, and spent $30 to get there. I get there, and he was not unattractive. He was fine, certainly serviceable. A little like energetically, I felt like he was a little too eager to please, kind of energy. So I was like, this is a little weird for me. And the sex itself was fine. It wasn't anything to like write home about. I was like, cool, thank you so much. We finished, went home, thought nothing of it, thought nothing of like ever seeing him again, talking to him again. Next thing you know, he's texting me every single day. He's like, come back over, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I really don't want to, this or that. And then, I'm as good of a job as I was trying to ignore him. He followed me on Facebook, and like he found me on Facebook, and I was like,
wow,
what is this guy's problem? Like I'm not giving him anything, and he's just like really trying. And the next thing you know, he texts me again. He goes, how do you know X? I guess he saw one of my mutual friends or whatever. And I was like, well, that is my ex-boyfriend. How do you know him? And he goes, well, that's my nephew.
Lord. Oh, God.
I said, how? I moved away. How
goodness.
Did any of that, how did that happen? And so Nick, I'm like, okay, well now like that breakup was very bad. Now you can never say anything to him.
Yeah.
Like, please don't. What does he go and do? He goes and contacts him.
Oh, God.
Let this happen.
Of course.
And so I'm getting a phone call from my ex saying, my uncle?
No.
Like,
my uncle is your
like,
way of
I
getting
don't know
past
how.
our relationship?
Horrible. And then you tried to
I
ghost
was like,
the
I
uncle.
had no.
Oh, God.
I was like, I had no idea. I'm like, he goes, you knew he. I'm like, I did not. I did not know that you had family members out here. Like that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
But however, the kind of silver lining of this was that, after we had that conversation of the uncle, we had a good laugh about it.
Good.
And he goes, you know what? This would happen to you. And I was like, you're right. It absolutely would happen to me. And we actually had a good laugh about it. We hadn't talked since the breakup. So it actually kind of opened things up a little bit.
Oh,
nice.
That is a
Yep.
silver lining. It reconnected you with the ex. Did you bond over how weird his uncle is?
Kind of, yeah.
I bet. I'm sure he had a comment to make.
Any other juicy ones, maybe not even yours, other people's too, of your
I'm glad to share one as well. Do you have any?
Ooh. Yeah, I do have one.
Do you?
Yeah, but you go. Well, should we all share?
Yeah, you go, Doug.
So that year,
I know you have one.
Yeah, I know he has like 20. I've probably heard them all.
I do have a
though,
lot.
but-
This one is so weird. So Demi, when I was single, I went on those like 30 dates in a year, right? Like I was just kind of exploring the field. Everyone wanted to set me up with somebody. And I went, I don't know even how this person got a hold of me, but they got my text number. And they said, I got your text number from so-and-so, I think, and, would you like to go out sometime? So we set up a time to go out. I'm sitting at the restaurant with this guy, and he looks dead square in my eye and says, I didn't ask you here on a date. I asked you here to confront you on sleeping with my boyfriend and taking my Christmas present from him. And I just looked at him and I said, first of all, who's your boyfriend? And he told me who it was, and he goes, you got a scarf and hat from Banana Republic for your Christmas present, didn't you? And I said, I did. It looks really good on me. And I literally said, you're an asshole. Thank you for the drink. And I walked out. But I remember thinking, who has the gall to do that?
Wow.
I know. I appreciate you holding your head.
The gall
Demi,
or
what
the balls?
Well, as if. Yeah.
As if.
And I remember looking back like, okay, first of all, I need to stop dating in this community of the Twin Cities because it's clearly too small and people are gossiping a ton.
Yeah.
And I did not love that. I found out who told him on which date I was on, confronted him too, and that ended that connection. So,
a lot of confrontation on this.
Yeah, I don't have a
almost
problem.
hookup.
I mean, Demi, it's kind of like you. Like when somebody is like either stalking or like finding you on Facebook and exploring who you know and then finding out it's his nephew.
Ew.
There's a really adaptive, normal, healthy way to respond to that. That's not what happened though. So
No. Yeah.
All right,
Quite bizarre.
mine. I can't compete really.
You can't?
Well, so I was working at a local ice cream shop because that was my teenage job.
Ooh, scandalous.
It was scandalous, and it was also it's called Sebastian Joe's. I love it. I think
Who doesn't love Sebastian Joe's?
And it's like everyone's favorite ice cream in the Twin Cities, but
Was it Uptown?
also Uptown.
Yep.
They also have, people that work there that are, came to Minnesota because of Hazelton and they're in treatment.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were dating a lot of people. One of my friends was dating the manager. It was just like a lot happening at Sebastian Joe's. But there was this one guy who was a customer, and I thought he was really hot. And I called him like Sailor Boy because he was like, I was 17. He was probably like 24.
Wow.
And so we were making eyes for a good, 6 months. And then he was like, when does your shift end? And I was like, oh, this girl's getting, lucky. I was wearing my Sebastian Joe's beret because that's what we had to wear, and my apron. And so when, we just took a walk together and we had a conversation. We went to the sculpture garden in Minneapolis, and I was still living at home, right? I'm 17 years old. And I bring him back to my house where I live with my mom. And he proceeded to dry hump my leg. And then he came in his pants. And then he said, I'm going to go. And I think that you need to date people your own age. And that was the last time I ever saw him.
And you said,
Wait, how
Do
old
I
was
win?
he?
Am I winning this contest?
I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
You might
Toot,
have.
toot.
You might have.
Yeah.
I think so. Mine is boring now.
Thank
so
you.
is Demi's.
Thank you.
Dry humping.
How old was he?
24. He was a much older man. He was 7 years older than me. But I think probably he was like, well, she's 17. I really don't want to do anything I'm going to regret.
Ay, ay, ay.
So, Sailor Boy, in case you're
So he
listening
just-
to this.
So he humped your
Yuck.
leg.
Bon voyage. Yeah,
I got
Demi,
a leg
that's
hump.
over mine. I agree with you. She wins.
Thank you.
Yeah, you might win that one.
I won a contest in our kink episode.
I got a scarf and a hat. Demi got a nephew.
No, he got an uncle.
And you got dry humped to orgasm. Huh.
I win.
How did you know he orgasmed?
Do I really have to draw you a picture?
I'd like you to tell the audience how you...
There was a wet spot.
Was it ice cream?
It was not. It was fresh.
What's that ice cream?
Demi, I'm so sorry. Did no one warn you that you were meeting with us today in this way?
We catfished you. Seriously.
I was thinking this is going to be a very professional interview, and this
With
has
two
turned into
therapists,
right?
Yes, surprise,
With two
surprise.
therapists.
Well, we could not be happier that you joined us today. And where can our people find you? Plug anything that you have going on that you want our listeners and viewers to find.
Yeah, so my podcast is Hook Up Horror Stories. You can find it wherever you get podcasts. It is on YouTube as well.
You have a great
I will
recording
probably-
voice.
Thank you very much. I definitely am working on a lot of things right now. I might be going through a rebrand on the podcast, actually, but
Ooh.
as it stands, it's still Hook Up Horror Stories. And then, my blogs, the Deviant Diaries, A Deviant's Guide to Sex, are available on my website, dimitriwylde.com. Check me out on YouTube, but you can check me out on Instagram at @DimitriWylde_. I think that's it.
Dimitri or Demi, it was beyond a pleasure. This was very fun. I knew it would be the minute I started reading your biography and your profile. I'm very excited that we had this conversation. It's a critically important conversation, despite how much fun we had. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you guys.
Well, we appreciate you. It was a blast. And I'm just thrilled that I won. That's all.
You did. You won. You get something. I'm not even sure that I think I would. I don't know that that's really winning, but
A condom on a necklace? What do I get?
use.
Oh,
Enjoy
Bye,
the rest of
Demi.
your weekend. Again,
Take
thank
care.
you, Demi.
Bye. Thank you.
Wasn't that fun? Aren't you proud of me for winning the horror hookup story of a lifetime with just a mere dry hump? Wait, what notes are you taking right now?
I'm thinking about our end question.
And why did you crumple up your piece of paper?
I thought we were done with the episode, and I forgot that we have to do an exit here. I really do hope you enjoyed this. Thank you, Demi, for opening up a conversation in a way that is really important. We don't talk about sex enough. We don't talk about bad hookups. We don't talk about, the experience that people are having, male, female, non-binary, on these dating apps. So it's a really important conversation. It could have gone for hours, as we always say, because it could go on and on and on about different ways. But I hope you all enjoyed the episode.
And if you loved it, or even if you hated it, this is what I always like to say. Like us anyway. We don't care that you're lying. Like and subscribe on YouTube too. Oh my God, we love your comments. Send it to a friend. Write a review. Hello, that would be like the gift of all gifts. If you wrote us a review right this second,
Ain't
we'll
that
wait.
the truth?
We'll wait for it.
And any questions, comments, any relationship issues, mental health questions, any weird dynamics in your life that you are struggling with, which who isn't? Please write us on we'renotfine.com. We welcome anything and everything that you might think about. There's no wrong question. There's no question that you should be ashamed or shy to ask. So please go to we'renotfine.com. And please let us know what you're thinking about.
Yeah, people
and we'll talk
love
about it.
The mailbags.
We
our
will talk
mailbags,
about it.
People are obsessed because they're very relatable. They're very relatable.
I agree with that.
And if you want to find us on social or see how cute we really are, especially Doug, an A-lister.
That's offensive.
I'm more of a B+. Come see us. YouTube. We're not
maybe.
fine. Hey, yeah. At least, no, we're going to get to that with the We're Not Fine. douglasljensen with an EN on Instagram. I'm Dr. Talia Jackson because I like to flex. And We're Not Fine Pod. And YouTube, just look up We're Not Fine. We've got some shorts on there.
Subscribe, please. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Please subscribe.
The shorts are really cool. I didn't know how they worked. I'm not a very savvy person, but I've been looking at them now. I love them. They give us a sense of things.
They really do.
I know.
Do you want to?
We're not fine.
But at least your God-given name is not Poseidopus. And you don't have to be in an eternal fight on Doug's nipple.
I was going to say we're not fine. I had another one too.
Oh, what is it?
It was, but at least we're not.
Saggy?
No, a dry humping sailor man.
Oh, yeah.
Like you had on your date.
I was dry humped. I was not the dry humper.
Are you sure? Are you projecting your experience?
It is one of the few memories that really is burnt into my memory.
The sailor man.
Bye, guys. I've
Take
got to
care.
go beat Doug up, but we will see you next week.
See you then.